was driving to work this morning and there was beautiful mist across the levels, and I drove up a hill called Belmont Hill, which is on the way into Bristol. Anyone that rides their bikes around here will know the notorious Belmont Hill as one that's a good climb. Pretty steady. It's not very long particularly, but it's a bit of a brute where there are kind of two sections to it, and it got me thinking back to 2015 when I was a good racer and I was in my mid 70 kilos or something, that I used to do reps up and down here. I wouldn't say I particularly enjoyed them, I wouldn't say I was particularly good, but I do remember sitting on my TT bike flying up and down these felt like flying up and down these hills as part of my training, and it kind of got me thinking about how I was focusing on it being cycling. And it got me thinking about how I was focusing on it being a cycling discipline, and that actually I always kind of wanted to be a cyclist given the three, and I don't make any excuses for that at all. Cycling is my first love of the three. But it did get me thinking about a conversation we were having on the coaching course last weekend, when somebody brought up the fact that whilst we have a CSS test for swimming, we have our FTP test for cycling, and we also have lots of different running benchmarks that we can do to kind of base our training off of, there isn't a triathlon specific benchmark. But of course, I think when you think about the obvious reasons why that is, it's because we don't train as a double discipline or a triple discipline really very often. We do treat each of the sports as individual elements that we just combine into a sport that we call triathlon. And it ultimately got me thinking about how the mindset of this sport is kind of put together really. Do we think about this as a single sport? Is triathlon actually a single sport? And I know that there are several schools of thought that really think about it being that way. I remember reading an interview with Brett Sutton where he was talking about the fact that people should think about training for this as a single sport, and one of his athletes that he coached, Chrissy Wellington, quite often spoke about how she never wore an aero helmet in Kona because it heated her body temperature up, and that had a massive impact on the run. So what allowances do we make for the sport that we're training for to consider the one that's coming after it? For example, is there anything you do in your swim training considering that we have to bike or run after that? And is there anything that you do in your bike training that takes into consideration the fact that you have to run off the bike? I do think that there are elements that we could look into in terms of doing this. Obviously, we have to change plane. We're going from being horizontal, completely horizontal when we're swimming, to being in a kind of compressed, almost horizontal, but using the legs, and the legs being lower than our kind of centre of gravity when we're on the bike, to being fully upright when we're running. Are there any considerations that we could do backtracking that would have an impact on the next discipline? And it's got me kind of thinking about that a little bit this week, what sort of things we could bring into the fold. And I'd be interested to know really, I know a lot of my videos recently have been about me trying to get back on track, and this week has really been another step in the right direction. It is winter training anyway, or however you want to look at it, but I do feel like I've made a step in the right direction in terms of getting my act back together and doing a little bit more consistent training. I think more important than that, I've also felt like I've had a bit of time just to spend some time with the family, play with the dog, play with the kids, spend a bit of time with Becky, and just kind of enjoy being part of the family, which I think is the first step to then feeling like I want to be training. But it did get me kind of thinking a little bit about what considerations we could put in place. I know some people would maybe change the position on the bike to allow for the run position to be there. In the past, I've done simple things like my helmet that I would normally wear for an all-out TT. I made some compromises with that. I used to have a cat-like chrono, which was a bit of a faff to get on and off, and I used to wear a Giro, I think it was called a shield, aero shield or something, the one that looked like a kind of mushroom on the head. To make some compromises for the fact that it was difficult to get the cat-like chrono on and off quickly. Now I use one of those Giro helmets that everybody uses. I forget the name of them now, but they're really easy to get on and off, so I don't have to compromise in that respect. It's a fast helmet, but it's also quick to get on and off as well. Obviously, we make compromises in terms of things like elastic laces for shorter course races, but I must admit, if I had my way being a cyclist, I'd definitely, if there was a quick way of putting socks on, I definitely like the aesthetic of wearing socks when you're on a bike. But I'm also a big fan of these short-sleeved, or at least sleeved, tri-suits now. I've never really been a fan of the kind of vest look, but that's more an aesthetic thing really from my kind of cycling mindset. So what allowances or compromises do you put into your single discipline training that has an impact on the next one? For example, what do you do in your swim training that has an impact on the cycling? What do you do in the cycling that you take on board because you know you have to run off the bike? That's what's going through my head this week. I'm going to make a list of ideas. Maybe I'll discuss those next week. Be great if you kind of made some comments below about what compromises you make so that you can think about that next discipline, or whether you just think of them as single disciplines. And then it'll be Christmas soon, and I'm looking forward to that. So that'd be great if you could subscribe to the channel if you like kind of triathlon stuff. I am really looking forward to getting back into making these TT videos. I've just got hold of a nice camera that I can use to shoot some really cool B-roll. So I have 2 more videos to complete on the TT series, which is about the drivetrain, but also in terms of the discussion about kind of marketing of some of those products, which I'm aiming to do in the run-up before Christmas. Anyway, have a good rest of the week, and I will see you on the next video.